people get most of their information from social media now. And I think that a lot of the time, there is this distance between health professionals and the general public because we can have a hard time explaining in layman's terms really complex topics. So I've always sought to do things in a way that people can understand and also to make it entertaining for them. That way it holds their attention.
Welcome back to the Med Creator 101 podcast. I'm Mimi Banks, founder of MB Social, and I'm here as always with my co-host, Dr. Dustin Portella, board-certified dermatologist and physician creator. Today, we're thrilled to welcome Dr. Angelo Landriscina, also known as DermAngelo. Dr. Angelo is a board-certified dermatologist, scientific researcher, and media personality based in New York City. He earned his medical degree from Albert Einstein College of Medicine with distinctions in dermatology and basic science research, completed his dermatology residency at George Washington University, and served as chief resident in his final year. He's also become one of the most recognizable dermatology voices online as DermAngelo, where he educates audiences on skin health, skincare culture, beauty trends, and the way people consume medical information on the internet. What makes his platform so interesting is that it doesn't feel like traditional medical education placed onto social media. It feels built for social media, conversational, culturally aware, personally driven, and still grounded in science. Today, we're going to talk about how he built DermAngelo, how he makes dermatology education feel engaging and accessible, and what med creators can learn from showing up online with both expertise and a point of view.
Welcome to the podcast, Angelo. We're excited to have a conversation with you.
I'm excited to be here, especially after that intro. Mimi, I'm ready to take you with me everywhere I go for a confidence boost. So.
I'll be your personal PR.
So before we get into your social media content and strategy, we love to ask some kind of off-the-wall questions, just learn a little bit more about you. So I was going to get you with 4 kind of rapid-fire questions.
Love it.
Favorite subject in medical school?
Obviously, rotation-wise, dermatology for sure. But in preclinical, we had a course about reading the literature, evaluating the data, how to do studies, research methods, all of that. I loved it. And I think that affinity for that type of thing, still informs how I evaluate the literature, how I approach patient care, and how I make content now.
I mean, that is a skill to learn the language of studies and how to understand the statistics. I enjoyed that class as well when I took it because it's very easy for the common person to read a headline or read an abstract and just pull one thing out of it. But really understanding the methods and the results and the gaps in the study is critical to actually getting the full information.
Yeah, you got to be able to rip it apart. So,
what was the hardest medical term you had to learn to pronounce?
You know what? A lot of the time I feel like it's people's names because a lot of people back in the day named conditions after themselves. And some of them were really prolific, like Purkinje.
Yeah.
So many things named after that guy. But it's when you're trying to relate things or talk about conditions and you have no idea what the other person's saying because you pronounce it differently. And sometimes I forget the names and I'm just okay, yeah, old dead guy syndrome. Because that's typically who it is. In dermatology, we have a lot of them, like dermatofibrosarcoma protuberans, or, when you're trying to inject the levator labii superioris lechinase muscle in the face.
Yeah. On that vein of all the conditions named after old dead guys, have you been to the Dermatology Museum in Paris?
No. You know what? I want to go. I've seen videos of it, and I'm going to Paris this summer, so it's on my list.
You absolutely should go. They're only open a few days a month. I went a few years ago, and it was incredible. So I highly recommend it. It's weird to get in there and find where to get tickets and go, and it's only $7. So go spend a couple hours there for sure.
Yeah, I should do that and nerd out.
Best advice you've ever received?
Ooh, it's hard to say the best, but document everything. I don't know. I don't know why I have such a defensive mindset and thinking about getting sued constantly or whatever, but documenting appropriately when seeing patients is really important, including, I think a lot of people get lazy now that there are so many shortcuts, but it's like, I'm not putting in there, oh, like a huge blurb about counseling unless I spoke to the patient about it. And also, if somebody professionally, you're having a conversation and you think they will not follow up on something, write them a follow up email. Paper trail. It's there. And then they can't say that they forgot that they told you this thing.
Good call. Very good advice. And I have found, maybe you've seen this too, even when you document appropriately, sometimes patients will still disagree with you. I had this happen on a cosmetic quote where it was written down, patient took it home, and they came back and insisted that I had quoted them an entirely different sum than we actually did and wrote down.
You know what? In my practice, they actually photograph every single piece of paper they give to the patient. Like, even if we write down the name of something to buy over the counter, this was not my idea, but I can see why they do it for reasons like that.
Yeah, there's no excuse. It was there. We had the documentation on both sides, but nope. So, well, thank you. Let's jump into some of the more important stuff as to what people can learn from your social media strategy.
And I love starting with your first post. It's so fun to go back and talk about the beginning. When was your first post? What platform? What was it? What did it look like?
Okay, so I am one of the dinosaurs of dermatology on social media. I started in January of 2019, and I was writing a blog. That's how old school it was. I initially said, I want a place where people could go for sound information online, or at the very least, it could be something that I could expand on topics that I usually don't have time to talk with patients about. So even if my own patients would use it as a resource, it would be good.
What's it called?
It's just dermangelo.com. Still there.
You were already DermAngelo?
Yep. I specifically remember when I was planning on doing this, I said to one of my co-residents that this was my plan, and she asked me what I was going to name it, and I said DermAngelo, and she was like, maybe you should reconsider that. I was like, well, I'm a dermatologist and my name is Angelo. And little did I know from writing that blog, I started first posting on Instagram and then other platforms just to get people to go read what I was writing. And over time, it turned into this whole different beast. And I feel like it's gone through several iterations because early on, it was mostly Instagram focused, a lot of carousel posts, infographics. I used to get on stories and like share a fun fact every day and just whatever I could think of. And now, as we've seen, the pivot to short form video everywhere has totally changed everything that I do. So yeah, I believe some of my first posts were about like bathing habits. I did one about collagen supplementation that I still send to people because I was like, okay, these are still my thoughts. I did one about facial changes as we age, seb derm, PCOS, a lot of common things that people have questions about.
And were these all related to the blog posts on DermAngelo? Because you said that's where it was feeding from? Or was these just common questions that you were hearing during your residency?
So that's how I decided to talk about different topics. It's either questions that patients had, or if somebody has PCOS, yeah, there are resources out there, but how do you give them a really in-depth deep dive that they can understand, like all in one post, rather than, unfortunately, most of us don't have the time to just sit there with patients and explain every little thing that goes on. But yeah, to create those resources for conditions that people were coming and talking to me about a lot, or common skincare products or drugs. Like I did like a really deep dive into retinoids, into isotretinoin, things like that. Especially, it started to be that social media was feeding me topics, which it still does, but I was going to my audience to direct me.
And you've done a really good job on balancing sound, clinical, scientific information with a voice that people can understand. Is that something that comes naturally? Is it something that you sought out extra training in? Maybe, I don't know if you were a major in English or literature, or how do you do such a good job of balancing what can be a really weighty subject with making it entertaining and easy to understand for a consumer.
Well, I think for me, humor is like at the heart of everything that I do in my life. I always say, when I was growing up, I didn't want to be a doctor. I just wanted to be funny. So I continued to do that. I really feel that we need to meet people where they're at. So people get most of their information from social media now. And I think that a lot of the time, there is this distance between health professionals and the general public because we can have a hard time explaining in layman's terms really complex topics. So I've always sought to do things in a way that people can understand and also to make it entertaining for them. That way it holds their attention. So that's the balance that I've found. When I was a kid, I loved watching Bill Nye the Science Guy. So I feel like that is kind of what I'm going for, but for adults, like giving people, sound really scientific information, but making it fun for them so that you're kind of like sneaking the medicine in with the candy or whatever it is that they do. Yeah. Also, it has to be fun for me. I mean, that's the other thing. Most of my content, I'm having a blast doing it. And I think if I'm having fun, my audience is having fun. So I try to bring that all the time.
Yeah, you do an excellent job of it. You can see the fun that you're having. And one of the ways that I've seen this is we all get different criticisms online, and the way that you react to criticism and pull up the comments and so one of the things that I enjoy about your content is your ability to bring humor into people who are not being nice, and then just bring those subjects of scientific confusion and just make them really understandable.
Yeah, I think people can be very unkind online. And for people who are just starting out making content, I think a lot of them get scared off by that because, look, we are really the authorities when it comes to our individual specialties. So to have somebody come into the comments and just be like, well, you're wrong, or studies show, and I'll be like, handout emoji, where are they? Give me the citation. I will go right back at people, especially usually when they're more deserving of it. Like, I don't take well to personal criticisms, like people trying to come for my ethics or something like that. So I will go right back at them. I am a human. We are all humans. And I think this idea of professionalism that keeps people from really saying what they mean sometimes can hold us back. You need to demand respect. And it doesn't matter if it's from people you know face to face or people behind a keyboard, because being behind that keyboard, I think, really emboldens people to say things that they would not say in person.
100%. Could not agree with you more for all of that. We see that constantly in social media of those people who are very empowered to share what they think behind that keyboard and in person. What I think is super interesting about, besides that you wanted to start education, which seems to be a very common theme. That's also why Dustin started with a lot of the big medical creators that we speak to. In your bio, you've mentioned that your research interests include LGBTQ plus focused dermatology and the way social media and internet influence how people consume medical information. How does that shape the way that you create content or your goals of even being on social?
Well, from the standpoint of LGBTQ plus health, as far as like in dermatology, I'm one of the few people who has spoken about it on social just because as a field of research or like a, specialty interest, we're a small community of people compared to the rest of derm. And I feel like I'm maybe the only one regularly making content. So it definitely informs my content, especially the research that I do. And then me being online and being so present on social has made that a research interest for me, especially because I think it's very easy to do very quick, shoddy research on social media. And I even wrote together with a med student mentee of mine a commentary that we published in the JDD about how doing research on TikTok is immensely difficult and that a lot of the research methods that are described in what's been published in the literature is flawed. And I think part of it is because the people doing it don't fully understand it. So it's just like an expanding area of research. And I think it moves so fast that the literature can't keep up with it.
But it outdates itself.
Yeah, by the time you get a paper published, it's probably outdated because so much content is going up constantly. The algorithms change all the time. So it's really a moving target.
Well, you mentioned something important. TikTok University is a real thing, and not everybody has the privilege of taking the class that you and Dustin did about how to distill information, how to read articles, how to read the research and understand it. Does that also shape your content or why you show up in terms of like your responsibility as a board certified dermatologist?
Absolutely. And I think that it keeps me really well informed on these topics because I'm constantly trying to see if there's new data about different topics or trying to give myself a refresher if I'm really going to put myself out there and start teaching to potentially, if it gets traction, millions of people. I think another way that it impacts the content that I make is that I will actually walk people through scientific papers and studies and explain why I think that they're significant or not, or what the flaws are. Because I think, the layperson, they just read a headline and even the media falls into this. It's hard for them to fact check.
Social media moves so quick and people want just bite-sized pieces of information. So they're scrolling. I mean, not to put my husband on blast, but recently he sent me an Instagram post with a big eye roll that I asked him to send to Dustin because he didn't believe me that if you go to sleep with your hair wet, that you can get cerebral palsy. And he there was this shock value and I was like, just send it to Dustin. This is nonsense. And where's the evidence? Where's the science backing for all these things? So yes, the lay people fall for this shock content that's meant to do that.
I had a family member send me a post not long ago that talked about like a correlation between hand sanitizer use and cancer. And it was a AI graphic on Instagram. And then you go into the caption and it says, oh, people are talking about this, but this claim hasn't been substantiated. So you made it up to get views, basically.
To get views. And then your family member saw the headline and didn't click because that's all we're doing is we're scrolling and we're scrolling and we're scrolling. And I think part of that, there was more that my husband didn't see, the same thing about like your wet hair. I think it's the responsibility when you're putting out content to have that science-backed information and to look at the research, as you said, and to really be transparent.
Yeah. When I was a resident, I actually did a elective working kind of like in a newsroom and going through stories and, stuff that would go on national TV. And when they want to do a report on a study that came out, they want it to be 15 seconds. So if I wrote it up, a script, like the producers were cutting stuff out and didn't realize that if you chip away enough, you start to change the meaning of the information in the interest of making it shorter. So I saw then how important it is to fact check and how quickly things could get sensationalized or the meaning of scientific information can change just out of brevity. So I think that informs what I do too, because I don't try to explain too much in one video anymore because of like, okay, you have to make it digestible, really easy to understand and succinct so that people could walk away with the right idea.
You're very culturally aware in your content, as good as anybody that I've seen in bringing in recent events, celebrity news, culture. How do you stay on top of the culture and bring that into your content to keep the things that you're doing and talking about relevant?
I always say I'm from the internet, so I feel like I grew up with memes and, I'm a millennial, so we were the first generation to like really have the internet. And I remember being in high school and writing the HTML to like my friends' MySpace pages for them and things like that. So I'm a consumer of social media too. And I think that is one of the best pieces of advice that I give people that are looking to start out. I'm like, just carve out maybe like 15 minutes a day to scroll and see what's going on before you just start making videos. Another part of that is also like you never figure it out until you do it and you need to practice. But yeah, it's like I am chronically online too. And I'm an enjoyer of, like I said, humor. So, like memes, the funny videos, stuff like that. It's like if you go through my TikTok feed, my algorithm is not beauty and skincare mostly. Mostly it's like funny videos and like things that make me laugh. And I do kind of know what's going on in the zeitgeist too. So I do use that.
What I think is important that you talk about here, and I think that this is also kind of what Dustin thinks about, is content. And how do you decide what you're going to share and the areas in which that you're going to feature? And whether people do memes, whether you're going to do what's happening in the zeitgeist, how do you decide what becomes content?
For me, I'm like, do I think it's funny? Do I think it's good? Do I think it's relevant? Or is it a question that's coming up a lot as far as like using current events? I do kind of shy away from talking about what everybody else is talking about. I don't know. The first thing that's coming to mind is when Jimmy Buffett died of Merkel cell carcinoma, and every dermatologist on the face of the earth made a video about it. I was like, I don't have to do that. Like, it's been covered. Great. But it's the weird stuff for me, or the trends really, that kind of get me. This trend cycle that we're in, especially when it comes to skincare and beauty, is crazy. It churns so much. So if that's what I'm going for, talking about the data behind the morning shed or red light masks or, a hot new procedure, I think it's something that resonates with my audience because they're seeing it everywhere. So staying on top of that, I think, is important.
Over the course of your social media career, things have changed a lot, and I want to highlight a 2024 article in Allure about the rise of dermfluencers. And they quoted you discussing how dermatologists on social media have changed the way that people learn about skincare. And I wanted to see if you could elucidate a little further on how the role of a dermatologist creator has evolved since you got started on social media to kind of where we're at now.
Yeah, I think that I saw a change mostly through the pandemic where now I went into COVID already doing social media, and I was a resident then, and now I've been an attending for years. And I have every AAD residents who come up to me that are like, I want to do what you're doing. And I'm like, this isn't the reason why you get into this career. I think those of us who were there early were very evidence-based and just wanted to bring education. But now the role has changed because there's so much more misinformation online than there used to be. So I think that our roles should be reacting to what's out there, really giving people sound advice, always having ethics with what we're doing. However, it is kind of a career path too. It can be lucrative in several different ways, whether that be working with brands, promoting your own personal brand, or bringing more patients into your clinic. So being able to balance that and do it in a way that's ethical, I think, is important.
Yeah, I think so. And I wanted to ask, what's been the biggest surprise for you about being on social media, or the most unexpected thing that's happened when you get started here in this space to educate, to create really solid resources for people who need that deep dive on PCOS? I know that I feel this way, that I never could have imagined what social media would have opened up for me. Is there a moment that's been just the most surprising for you?
I feel like I'm surprised every month. I have one surprise now. So whether it be working with A-list celebrities on brand work or being able to launch my own brand, I think the greatest thing it has done for me is given me the financial security where I get to choose where I work clinically. My first job out of residency sucked. I was so burnt out. And at a certain point, I made enough from social media that I said, this was also still during COVID, so it was hard to find jobs anywhere. But I was like, you know what? I'm not going to do this anymore. Even if I don't get hired somewhere for months and months, I'm secure enough that I will only say yes to the right thing. So it has allowed me the freedom to be able to do that, flexibility to like be there for my family. And I think that's something that I never envisioned when I started doing it, I always thought, oh, yeah, I'll be doing this on the side. And maybe I could do some media or do regular interviews about stuff or, go that traditional media route, which I do some of, but I didn't think that this would become kind of like the main event of my career.
A thing, yeah, from DermAngelo.com. Who was the biggest A-list celebrity that you worked with?
Ooh, right now I can't say. But
Ooh.
I will say that I have done a series called Skinterviews where I've interviewed Scarlett Johansson, Elizabeth Banks, Kerry Washington, and Haley Steinfeld so far.
What was that for?
All of them were usually it's like they're promoting a brand or they're a spokesperson. And I asked the brand, can I get 5 minutes with them? And they don't know about the questions beforehand.
Very cool. I would say for Dustin was on like SNL, and these are just, again, experiences for dermatologists, for a physician that, I don't think that Dustin would have imagined when he was in med school.
No, not a chance. So I want to dive kind of behind the feed and look at the process of creating content, not where the ideas come from, but how you sit down and record, edit, a team that helps you, anything like that. What does your setup look like and the work process of creating content look like so people can understand what they might need to get started or where you've, evolved to in your content creation?
Yeah, I mean, where I started was literally just the camera on my phone, handheld. Now I always say, hey, if I have a ring light, a microphone, I'm good. So whether that be for many years, I was just working out of my home. Now I have like a dedicated office space where I do social media and I run my clothing business, Soleil, from here too. But yeah, it could be as simple as that. How I plan out the content is usually I have a great community, a great audience that is constantly tagging me in videos that they want explained. A lot of what I do is reaction content. So they help me find those videos that I react to. The other stuff that I make is also informed by what people are asking me about. Right now, I have a series called What the Hell Is That? Where I'm talking about common skin findings that people might have questions about that they've never heard the name of, but they know they might have it. And in the comments is always like, oh, do this next, do this other condition. I want to learn more about that. Like, that's where I get my ideas most of the time. Or if something's like a big trend that there's a question about, like, I'll make videos about that. I also have my own podcast now called Divine Skintervention, where me and a cosmetic chemist are basically breaking down different controversies and topics within beauty and skincare. So we have a producer for that who also produces short form out of it. I would say that's where I get the most help. But other than that, like the shooting and editing is done by me, which is crazy.
And the posting and everything, you manage all of it?
I post, I do everything.
Question about that then. Do you create a content calendar? Do you batch create?
I do batch create. I tend to now just because that's what's worked well for me. So throughout the week, if people are like tagging me in different stuff or giving me ideas, I'll either like keep a list or I'll save videos that I want to react to. And in the back of my mind, I think I've already got what I want to say. And then I could bang out a week's worth of content in like an hour. And I post 21 times a week. So
are you using a scheduling tool for that or manually you get on? Do you have a tool that repurposes content from one to another? Do you upload individually to each platform?
typically I upload individually to each platform, except where there's like tools that you could cross post. So for instance, for Instagram, it's like it's posting to Instagram, Facebook, Threads, and Pinterest for me. But I am everywhere. That's another thing that I think people should take away for that. Repurpose all of your content because
Oh, for
all
sure.
of these apps are becoming the same app. It's all short form video. And hey, if you get stuck in the 200 view jail on TikTok, that video could take off elsewhere. So I never thought, like, when I started out that YouTube would be my biggest platform where I have the biggest following, but that's what it became. And it's like I don't create specific content for different audiences. The only thing I would say is like Instagram stories, I'm very prolific with. I will post on them every day. I try to do a weekly AMA with my followers over there. So that's like the one thing that I kind of do differently. But it's just me. And that I think that goes to show you like how easy it is to get started if you just do it.
The other thing that I like, I'm just getting excited by what you're saying, is 21 times in a week. So, and you can batch that in about an hour. Does that mean that you're doing quick content, meaning like you don't do a script before, or you're just speaking off the cuff, boom, bang it out, boom, bang it out? And so there's a question, and I think that even myself, when I'm thinking about starting or doing any kind of content, is that when you're first starting, you are scared in a way of how you're going to be received, or people want to have more polish versus thinking about the outcome or the goal just as getting it up and trying and seeing what works. It sounds like to me that you're able to, I mean, you know what your audience likes, but that you're able to use that like snackable content and just bang it out without having like 6 takes for each.
Yeah, no, I mean, what I will do that's not done in that hour is like I do edit sometimes afterwards. So it's like, okay, if you don't see it perfectly, you could cut it together in a way that makes sense. Or if I need to add like images over top of what I'm talking about, I'll do that afterwards to make it like a little bit more visually interesting. But that's part of what I'm saying with you can't really explain an entire complex topic in a short form video. You could take like a little bite-sized piece of information about it and make it a series and just do one after another. But for people who don't really have a big following to inspire them or ask them questions, what I usually say is think about stuff that you're saying to your patients. If you just said something to a patient that you think would be really good for a lot of people to hear, set up your phone, say the same thing. That's the type of education that people want from us, the practical things or the stuff that maybe their derm or other doctor doesn't have the time to tell them or maybe they don't have the access. So it's something that you would like them to know. That's the easiest thing. Find inspiration in the stuff that you're already talking about.
We always say, like, keep your notes app open. If a question comes up in clinic that's interesting or different, or if the question comes up like 3 times, that's a post, that's a video.
As we look into the future, we learned a little bit about your podcast, Divine Skin Intervention, and we're going to link to that in our podcast show notes. But I'd like to learn a little bit about your brand Soul A that you launched within the last year, sun protective clothing brand, and what you've learned from building a brand versus building your personal brand. And then just tell us about Soul A and the mission behind that.
Yeah. So this came to me because I know that we're always telling patients about using sun protective clothing as part of a more complete sun protective strategy. I know I am. However, most of the options that are out there, they leave something to be desired in the style department. And most of the time, they are kind of situation specific clothes, rash guards, resort wear, golf clothes. And I want people to have something that they could use in their everyday life. As we've seen people think more about making sunscreen part of their everyday life, I said, why not sun protective clothes? I also have a little bit of a background in the fashion industry. So it's something that always was in the back of my mind that I wanted to do. And one day I said, hey, I've got an audience. I have, the wherewithal to do it. I have a dream. I'm going to follow it. I have like no outside investment. I'm doing all of this on my own. So it has been a big process of learning kind of from the ground up, not just how to build a company, but how to, design and manufacture clothes and dealing with everything that comes with that. If I had started with like a straightforward beauty brand, I think things would have been easier for me because I have all these industry connections and people who could give me advice and things like that. I don't have that working in clothing manufacturing and production and sales. So I think there's been so much to learn. Probably the number one thing that I learned, though, is that having a big audience doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to have a built-in huge customer base. You need to do the education around it. It doesn't matter if people like you, especially if we make quality products and the price really reflects that. And I think that creating something that lasts was very important for me. I didn't want to create garments or accessories that people are going to throw away like fast fashion. And I'm vindicated in the way that our customers consistently say that they love the quality of our pieces and that they're pleasantly surprised by it. But I think people are trained to look for something very cheap. And even if they like you, there's only a certain amount that they're willing to spend. So we've seen our sales aren't just reflected in the fact that people like me. It's more when we do education around the product that had to be totally separate. And it's now I have a social media team that works on Soleil specifically. And I pop in there for content as the founder to, sort of be the face and also to provide education about why we should be using sun protective clothing or why we should be protecting our skin from the sun at all. But for the most part, I've had to say that brand voice is not my voice. It is totally separate because I want that business to be able to walk on its own without me eventually.
Completely different thing to try to tackle. And it's fun to take on a new endeavor like that. And it just speaks to your ingenuity and your creativity to be able to do something like that. So I wanted to get kind of a last piece of advice from you on aspiring creators that are physicians who are not yet on social media. What would you say to yourself before you got started? Or what would you say to somebody who's thinking of dipping their toes into the water?
Yeah, I would say don't overthink it. Just start. You will figure it out as you go. And I think the reason I'm so efficient now and I really have my voice and all of that is because I just did so much of it. It could be a lot of time spent maybe not getting a lot of eyes on your content or feeling like it's not paying off, but it's something that you really need to stick with and push through. I mean, Rome wasn't built in a day and neither was DermAngelo. So people just got to stick with it. Just start. Don't overthink.
Yeah. Great advice.
Incredible. Thank you so much for sharing so much wisdom and inspiration for all different levels of med creators or for med creators at anywhere in their journey, for people who are just starting, people who are established, or people actually who want to build a brand and what it takes.
Thank you.
We'll have links to Soleil and to your podcast in our podcast show notes as well. And we've already established you're at DermAngelo on all social media platforms. And we'd encourage you, to the listeners, to go and find and follow Dr. Landriscina because he's a great example of bringing authenticity. And I just love the culturally relevant content with great information and education. So please go give him a follow. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Med Creator Podcast. Leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen to podcasts, and we'll catch you next week.